I hate to be the one to interrupt good conversation, but here we are at the readout point. So thank you for your time and attention to the questions, and I'll pass straight to Benjamin, who's going to kick us off with the thoughts from their table.
As a group, we're trying to identify a number of issues, and one of them was a lack of insights. Okay, so it should be on, yeah. It's more of like a lack of insights, because most of the solutions are supposed to address a certain need on the grassroots. If we use the context of like an African context, you need to know exactly what is the issue on the ground before you can start addressing that particular issue. So we're thinking of the issue of implementation also could be another issue, and the need for like leveraging on data scientists. And the other challenge we've also noted is like industry partnership, and actually the group cited an example whereby are there any instances where tech companies have been able to come together to think through, co-create, and come up with a solution which addresses a need in the society. Then the last one, and Brenda, you'll chip in, it was all about flexibility, and flexibility in the sense that there is a lot of urgency, and sometimes we call it unconstructive urgency, because you've been supported by a funding partner. When you're going to engage the other partner, be it a private sector partner, you also need to be flexible in the sense that you look at their pipeline, what they are working on, so that you can agree and be on the same page as far as the implementation plans are concerned. So that flexibility, if you have been funded for like a year, you need to talk to the funders to tell you that, I mean, the clock starts ticking once you have the partnership in place, rather than the day they gave you the check. Yeah. I don't know whether I captured everything. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, Ben, I think you covered it. You know, on the second question, we talked about how we're already seeing that happening, for example, in the healthcare sector. Maybe not so much in like the tech sector has been mentioned. So there's an opportunity there. Maybe the tech sector can learn a little bit from the healthcare sector. And then the whole issue of IP, you know, is that a stumbling block in the tech sector that needs to be overcome, and competition?
Oh, did someone leave a phone outside? Yeah, great points there, and I think there are absolutely lessons learned from the life sciences collaborations over the years that we should and must transplant into other sectors. Folks at this table, who is your allocated speaker? Who wants to step up? Don't all rush in at once.
We had a discussion about what we mean by the word multi-sectoral. This meeting has talked a lot about multi-sectoral in the sense of private sector, government, nonprofit, civil society. But we had a discussion about maybe reframing some of that in the sense of trying to innovate and look at how to solve health problems by engaging more directly with the education sector, the environment sector, the agricultural sector, the youth employment issue, workforce development sector, and kind of going bigger and coming up with more integrated models. Also linking back to the SDGs, there was a comment about how a lot of our discussion has been about larger organizations, and maybe we need to focus from an innovation perspective on going more down to the grassroots level and looking at the needs and capabilities of smaller actors to address some of these problems. And then we talked a little bit about reporting requirements and sort of the different metrics that private commercial partners might be requiring of partnerships versus metrics that civil society and other actors would care more about, and how there needs to be more alignment on that. Did I miss anything? Is that good?
That was excellent.
Okay.
Great points there, thank you. And certainly the question of collaboration across sectors outside of what we are defining as multi-sector here, it comes up, and you'll certainly enjoy, I think, the coming focus on cities that this forum might tackle. So folks over here, can I invite someone from this table to feedback?
The first point we discussed was the need for more system innovation, we realized there is quite some partnership on system implementation, but the system innovation partnerships is something which is lacking, where we have more of the technology side than the system side. Then we went into the question of the measuring success. When do you need a third party? Who pays for it? Who mandates? When you interrupted us, I was going to say that probably we need to make a distinction in those partnerships where the private sector in the public interest should do more of what it is doing. It's less problematic if they are also paying or mandating the third party, while those where the private sector has to change its behavior, it gets problematic if they themselves mandate the monitoring. Example, reduction of sugar. If they pay the third party monitor, the public tends not to trust them. While I would say if UPS pays a third party monitor, that same problem won't exist. So you have to look at when can you use which kind of third party monitoring, but also to learn more from private sector core experience, how much of third party monitoring is actually worth the value. Not to under monitor, but not to overspend in monitoring for huge costs. And finally, one point which came up was people start to much more self-monitor their health. How can we start to tap into those resources?
Thank you. Table at the back here, or the front as it is.
So taking both of these, and folks, please do chime in. Actually, we took these slightly differently. So our consensus is that there's really not innovation lacking, but rather there's a coordination of such innovation. And one person, my colleague, has characterized it as the 3 C's: communication, cooperation, and coordination. Someone also said, and I think this is an important point, we can't equate innovation and technology, right? There is also innovation of design, innovation of processes, or whatever. So it's much broader, or we need to keep it much broader than that. Regarding the multiple private sector partners in the same environment, this was interesting because apparently what happens is there's a lot of sequentialness, right? In terms of somebody goes to a government, gives their spiel, the next day somebody goes with a very similar spiel, et cetera. And I think with the private sector, you all please correct me, but the private sector partners, and it would probably really help the project itself, is to bring everybody together, right? And let people kind of give their complementary spiels, give their complementary perspectives, and they're all grown-ups, and they can figure this out, as well as probably expand the pie in ways that would not happen if you continue to do this sequentially. So I think the more players you can get around that table, even, I dare say, competitors, I think you will get a much better project or process or initiative as you move forward. And I think then the last point we would just make, because it comes from Donald's ivermectin. One is that power of those 14 CEOs and big pharma coming together for river blindness. But I think at the end of the day, the other thing is in any of these good projects, and some are relatively new, and some are have been in the works for many years. But how do we sustain this? How do you turn this over to someone, a government, right, so that somewhere down the line they own this, and that sustainability can not just exist but actually thrive?
Great points there, great points. And then finally, but absolutely not least, who'd like to kick us off from this table?
So I'll make a few comments and our table can chime in. So we focused more on the second part of the question, which was looking at how do we mainstream or normalize or routinize these partnerships. And there's two adages I want to draw on. One is opposites attract. And there's a reason why we come together from different sectors, and so we should certainly retain that. And then also to on that sort of dating analogy, to scale up dating, we have tools like Match.com, right? That has really expanded access for people to get together. And that's an external thing to people getting together. And so it's almost when we think about how do we scale up and foster that environment, it has to be institutionalizing that partnership approach, which means there has to be some sort of entity. And the example was brought up yesterday about the Institutional Review Board. But if there's some sort of partnership platform that has the specific lens of spotting those opportunities, providing partnership governance and oversight, reviewing conflicts of interest, and bringing people together across all these sectors, that's what we can actually institutionalize at a country level and be that enabling body. There is a position that a friend of mine has. It's a very interesting position. He works in the cybersecurity world, and he works for a large entity, and his title is liaison. And what he does is he speaks to every department in this large entity, and he says, oh, you should speak to those people, and you should speak to those people. So his job is actually to maintain and spot those things. And I think the best go-betweeners we have in our sector in health is people who jump from industry to NGO to UN agency, but they don't have that sort of mandate to make those connections. So we think institutionalizing it may be an option.
Yeah, great point there, and the intentionality of these relationships, which are not easy and take work, and we need to do more to enable those. So first of all, thank you again for all your thoughtful comments and contributions. I'd like to join a round of applause to thank the panel again for their great work.